Hello and welcome to the Somerset Archaeological and Natural History Society, which is usually known as SANHS. My name's Lizzie Induni and I'm the chair for SANHS. This evening, Richard Bashford will be talking about the Falklands, South Georgia and Antarctica. Richard was born in Sandy in Bedfordshire, home of the RSPB, and has worked there on and off since leaving school, as well as a stint at the British Trust for Ornithology. Richard's travelled widely in search of wildlife and has taken part in conservation projects in Kenya, Botswana, Jordan, Albania, and China. He has been leading wildlife tours since the 1980s and has led nature trek holidays in many countries, including 2 trips to Antarctica. He's very active in his home county of Bedfordshire, supporting survey work and spending much of his free time searching for birds, butterflies and moths. As usual, Richard will be available to take questions at the end of the talk, and you can activate the questions by activating the chat button at the bottom of the page and typing in a question. Because we're recording this lecture, we won't be using any names in the question time. It's free to register for the talks, but a donation of £5 towards the ongoing costs of SANHS would be greatly appreciated. The donations page is on the SANHS website, Donations. When donating, please label your donation Antarctic. To make things easier, a link to the donations page will also be posted on the chat button at the end of the lecture. So, over to Richard.
Thank you very much, Lizzie. It's great to be here. Great to talk to the organisation, and also very great to talk about this particular subject matter. So I'm going to start with the first slide. Hopefully that is showing for everyone. Right. So Nature Trek. This is the company I work for in my free time. As someone that's interested in wildlife, the ultimate destination, as far as I could work out, was Antarctica, but it's extremely expensive to get there. So I've been very, very lucky to have been twice now. Actually working. They think you're having a jolly. So anyway, just assume I'm working. I'm showing people wildlife in an amazing place. My talk is about 45 minutes long, and it's going to take you on the virtual tour of what we do on the Nature Trek cruises. They actually charter a ship. The ship is actually on the quay you can see in this photograph, and that is looking south from Ushuaia, the most southerly city in the world, and that's the Beagle Channel. So on the right is Chile, and on the left is Argentina. And yes, there's a row of 3 ships you can see on the quay. The one we're actually on is behind them, so you can't quite see it. So it's not a big ship, and that's very key, really. You don't want a huge, huge ship like some of the others you can see in the distance there. This one takes about 100 people, and that means you can all fit in Zodiacs and go ashore at the same time, and that's very key if you're going to one of these trips. But anyway, let's get going. First thing you do is you go down the Beagle Channel. That takes quite a long time. And as soon as you start going down the Beagle Channel, you start to see the things that this part of the world is famous for. And this is a black-browed albatross. And this is an enormous bird. But this is a small albatross. This is barely 9-foot wingspan, so it's a tiny little thing, really. Beautiful makeup. So this is black-browed albatross. And it's just the first. I've actually seen one of these years and years ago, because one lived on Shetland, and I was working on Shetland, and there was one with the gannets, but I've never actually seen one fly before. So this was a good thing, waiting another 30 odd years to see one flying, and you see many more than one. So this is the big albatross. Going a little bit further on the way to Falklands, this is the one that's extremely famous in the Guinness Book of Records, the wandering albatross, and that's about 11.5-foot wingspan. So this is a big albatross. They don't come any bigger than this. In fact, that's the longest, the widest wingspan of any bird. Fantastic looking bird, the wandering albatross, and it's not a particularly hard bird to see, but always takes your breath away. And then just to go to the other side of things, this is a much smaller bird. This is the Wilson's petrel. Not particularly maybe that exciting compared with the enormous albatrosses. It looks a little bit like a house martin that you may have nesting in where you live, but it's about the same size as a house martin. It's possibly one of the commonest birds in the world. There are colossal colonies of this bird, and they pitter-patter over the sea, finding bits to eat. And then they're generally so fast they're quite hard to see. But there are enormous numbers of them in the southern oceans, and they come all the way up here. There's a range of seabirds that come all the way to the northern hemisphere in the wintering grounds and breed in the south. So this is the Wilson storm petrel. So we're heading about a day and a half's sailing to the Falkland Islands. It's a very interesting place. A lot of people go there for wildlife holidays. This is a sort of a map showing you where we generally landed. And both the trips that I've done, we go to you'll see an island there called Carcass Island, named not a particularly lovely name, but named after HMS Carcass, which was a ship. As you probably guessed, and then Saunders Island, and then all the way around to the right-hand side to Stanley, because you got to go to Stanley if you go to the Falklands, and this is your first chance really of going to somewhere really special. And you're told the day before you're going to go there, and it's got a lot of daylight this time of year, and they would suggest get up really early, see the sunrise as you come in towards the Falkland Islands, and also it's a good place for whales. So you kind of do that. And this is what I did at 4:30, and they're the Falklands in the background, and then you can see some blows of whales. In fact, there's 3 blows there, but I think I counted about 25 blows of whales as we approached. So that takes your breath away for starters. These are sei whales. Sei whales are one of the biggest whales, very, very tall dorsal fin. And I managed to take some video, and I've just taken a grab of that. So this is a very dodgy photograph, but it's, as I say, it's a video. But look at the size of that dorsal fin. Really quite something, isn't it? It looks a little bit like a killer whale, but a much bigger animal, of course. So that's sei whale, SEI. And then for me, this really, I don't know how to explain it. So this is approaching our first place we landed, and there you can see one albatross there. That's another black-browed albatross, and we're going to visit an albatross colony. So we're going to get it. We're going to land, get in the Zodiacs and land. We're going to walk up a hill. Both times I've been to the Falklands, it's been sunny and lovely. I'm sure it's not like that all the time. But you can see one albatross there, but all those other dots are also black-browed albatrosses. And there's a little sundog, I think they're called, this little coloured patch in the sky. Thousands and thousands and thousands of albatrosses. So we anchor, get in the Zodiacs. You walk up, you meet the owners of the island, which in this case was the Scandinavian couple. It's not all Brits that live there. In fact, it's a very cosmopolitan place. And then we walk up this grassy slope. It looks a little bit like Shetland or Orkney or some of our offshore islands in this country. Very similar. And we walk for about 20 minutes. First things you see on Falklands is some strange looking creatures. These are steamer ducks. And they're not particularly good at flying, but look at the size of the feet on these things. There's about 3 or 4 species of steamer duck, all in this part of the world. But this one has the lovely name of Falkland steamer duck. It looks identical to the other ones, to be honest, but you only get it on the Falklands. And there's a flightless steamer duck. And then there's also a flying steamer duck. And you can tell those, well, you don't need to tell you how you tell those apart. You just have to wait for one of them to fly. This is the delightful name of Johnny Rook. And this is a bird of prey called a striated caracara. And this is one of a few birds of prey. There aren't many species of bird on the Falklands, but they're all pretty special. And so it's a bird of prey, and it hangs around penguin colonies for obvious reasons. And it tends to walk around and looking for not particularly pleasant things to eat, and also young birds. Crested caracara, striated caracara, or Johnny Rook is the name the locals give to it. But we're here to visit this black-browed albatross colony, and you can walk quite close to them, and they are enormous birds. As I mentioned, they're a small albatross, but they're still big. And at this time of year, December, my trip was in December, and the last trip was in January. They're nesting. They're just having their chicks. So you can see this adult feeding the chick in that mud nest, and all these others are sitting on their nests as well. So the chick is about 10 days old, I think. Lovely, fluffy thing. And in amongst them, here we go, your first penguin. These are fantastic rockhopper penguins. And they're called rockhopper penguins. I mean, all penguins hop, but habitat of these ones is rocks and scree slopes. So they are called rockhoppers. That's the name they've been given. Brilliant things. And these are chattering away the whole time. The albatrosses are doing the same. There'll be a striated caracara watching from a grassy knoll. But that's how close you are to them. Now, in terms of tourism and the number of people that go to see these wonderful things, it's worth pointing out straight away that this is probably one of the most regulated places on the planet. Before we go to this, they put posts up. You can just see one in between the man in the red and the man in green with the camera. And these posts are to say, this is where you go to. You can't go any further than this. They actually put a perimeter up for you. And then there's an expedition team that are with you, and you visit when no one else is visiting. So they sort of time the visits for cruise ships. So we're actually, as I say, a relatively small cruise ship. But look at that. Look how close you are. You don't need a long lens, really, do you? Black-browed albatross and rockhopper penguin colony. Then we go to another island, which is called Saunders Island, and it has this lovely area called the Neck, which is a thin sort of sandbar. And these are Magellanic penguins. So these are probably the ones you get in most zoos, I think. Or the African penguins, which look quite similar to this. But these are playing around in the surf. Lovely, lovely creatures. And then you get slightly bigger penguins. These have a little bit more personality, perhaps. These are called Gentoo penguins. They're about 3 foot high, so getting on. And this is one of the parties here, but with just to show you what you can do. That's a Gentoo penguin colony, and they tend to nest in colonies on little rises of mud. And you can go quite close to them. You can't approach penguins. You can't walk up to them and take a photograph, but if they approach you, that's fine. And they do. And that's same with the albatrosses. These birds have very young chicks. So this is a Gentoo penguin asking to be fed. Beautiful. Now, there's you can go out to your garden on a day like today, lovely sunny day, and you can probably see lots of small birds. This part of the world, there's hardly any, especially when you go to Antarctica. There aren't any small perching birds or passerines, as we'd call them. But in the Falklands, there are a few, very small number, maybe about 15. And this is a special bird that only lives on the Falklands. You probably recognize it as a wren. This is called Cobb's wren, and it's an endemic species. So most of the places you go to on the Falklands, you can't find them because they've introduced rats and cats and pigs and goats and things, and they've basically made this species extinct on many of the islands. But where they've eradicated those things, a lot of island restoration, they're very common. So we go to Carcass Island because that's one of the islands they've eradicated the introduced predators. And seeing the Cobb's wren is not hard. And let's move back to some mammals. This is a delightful tiny little dolphin called Commerson's dolphin, and it's tiny. It's about 1 meter long, but they love zodiacs. I mean, that's probably not the right way of saying it, but they seem to go for zodiacs and go underneath them, and they're black and white, and they have this lovely name of sea panda, according to the locals, which I think is delightful. So very hard to miss these if you're going from a big ship to the land in a zodiac. I mentioned Stanley, and I mentioned it was quite an odd place because it's got things like this there, red uh, post boxes and telephone boxes, statues of Margaret Thatcher, things like that, things that you don't see every day. Yes, a very strange place. We have a morning there, and it's quite nice to have a look around this quite a well-known town, of course, but nowhere near anything else. And you have this little patch of little town, which, to all intents and purposes, looks a little bit like Cleethorpes. It's very, very strange. Well, Cleethorpes made out of corrugated iron in the most part, but there are Victorian terraces when you get off the boat, which is quite bizarre. But I wanted to just then move you away from the Falklands, because that's your first time of seeing various bits and bobs, to what I would say is perhaps the most incredible place I've ever been. And this is South Georgia. South Georgia is another 2 days away. In fact, the third morning you wake up at dawn, and hopefully you'll see South Georgia like this. So it's a British overseas territory. Hardly anyone lives there, just researchers, but in terms of humans, but it's incredibly important for wildlife. And this is the view that I was getting, and I say it's the most incredible place I've ever been for wildlife. It just was tremendous. You approach this, and I've been both times I've been. It's been very good weather, so very, very lucky. Not known for wonderful weather. In fact, it's quite a dry time to go to the southern seas, but you can't really, if it's windy, it's probably not quite so pleasant. And we sailed in, and you can just start to hear the fur seals, and the fur seals sing. They make this lovely, lovely noise. I can't do an impression because that doesn't work over Zoom, and you're probably thankful for that anyway. But I just can't imagine what the first people that ever went there thought. They must have thought this place was littered with mermaids and sirens, etc. But you come into this thing and you just hear this singing, and it's the sound of the fur seals. So we're going to go to a few places. These are various stops that we did on our first visit, these are all based around colonies of birds and seals, elephant seals. And one of the reasons, I don't know, I describe this as Lord of the Rings with penguins. It's just the most glorious things. You've got white-capped mountains, you've got glacier, and you've got loads of penguins. And in this case, these are king penguins. King penguins being nearly the biggest penguin, about 4 foot high, and not just one or two either. So these are a colony. But I'll just show you a few more photographs of landing. So we stopped at Stromness on our first day. So these places, you'll recognize the names if you've been to Orkney and places like that, or indeed quite a lot of these places are named after Scandinavian places, depending on who set up the whaling station there, because that's where most of the original dwellings were for whalers. So this is a disused whaling station. Again, you can't go anywhere near it because it's too dangerous, loads of sharp bits of metal, but you can walk within the guidance posts. But in the foreground, probably not looking at the buildings, are you? Probably looking at these incredible elephant seals. These are female elephant seals, or young male, possibly young males. They don't have this huge proboscis on their face. And similarly, you can go quite close to them. They don't move particularly. They're not an issue for people, but they give you a briefing. They tell you all about this. You'll see someone there. They're not in the background in the green, and they are crouching. They're not kneeling. You're not allowed to sit down on the ground. You're not allowed to kneel. You're not allowed to take chairs or anything like that. So it's a very, very important place to for biosecurity. The biosecurity, I should say, is extremely taken extremely seriously. So much so that you're looking for seeds in your Velcro patches on your jacket. You're running. I'm trying to think of a little paper clip into your grooves of your wellies to make sure there are no grains of sand or seeds from somewhere else you've been. Incredibly tight, and then you're inspected, and if you pass, you're allowed to land. It really is as serious as that. You all sign a form before you go to the North or the South Pole. So this is, if you've done it all right, this is what you can do. So these are elephant seals in the foreground. These are young males getting a little bit practice in to just to assert their dominance, and in the background are some king penguins. Now, I took this with a fairly ordinary camera, but as I mentioned, these are big birds. They're quite tame, and there are, I don't know, millions of them, maybe 250,000 in this colony. It's just an incredible size of biomass. And these are king penguins, all in a colony, and just tremendous. So I say it was a standard camera. I'm not much of a photographer, but it was a fairly ordinary zoom lens. It wasn't a posh Nikon or anything like that. It's just something that zoomed up about 200 millimeters or whatever. So pretty easy to be an excellent photographer if you go to Antarctica. And I also took this one, which is perhaps my favorite view, St. Andrews Bay, with glacier in the background, and then king penguins and fur seals, these smaller animals with them, are either side of the river. Just amazing. You just cannot believe what you're seeing. And then the second time we went, it was trickier to land because there was quite a lot more restrictions because of avian flu. But this is Salisbury Plain, again, a name you're probably familiar with, but not perhaps this particular site. That sort of pale patch there, and all the way up into the green of the hillside there, they're all king penguins. Again, huge number, and that's me with a telephoto lens taking a photograph of that last slide, and you can see straight away there's just so many. But walking around in again pretty good weather, thankfully, and the king penguins will do all sorts of wonderful things, like scratch their head with their foot. You can get some artistic shots. I was quite pleased with that, but you know, anyone can do it. And then, of course, something that you'd expect to see is a young one. They have a breeding season that extends beyond a year, so that a lot of the youngsters will stay with the adults when they're all the other ones are nesting, they're laying eggs. So you get all different ages of penguin together, king penguin in this case. But isn't he cute? Few photographs here of a lovely elephant seal looking at you with king penguins in the background. Just an amazing place. And for me, I came back from this whole trip first year thinking, well, Antarctica, yeah, it's great to go to Antarctica, but South Georgia was the place to be. And I think I changed my mind a little bit, having gone for the second time. But anyway, this is Grytviken, which is named after the Norwegian whaling center. Has a church, has a museum, has a post office, and it's actually one of the few places you can walk around and visit the buildings and see some of the workings of a whaling station. Lots of whalebone in the foreground, and the reason you can work around this one is because they've made it safe and as a museum. So fascinating place to go. About 4 people live there. There is actually a British Antarctic Survey research station nearby with about 20 people in it, but actually 4 people run this settlement. So you go there to get a stamp and put it on a postcard and send it home, and it does get home just about a week after you get home yourself. The other thing that's famous for in Grytviken, of course, is Shackleton. So Shackleton is an incredible story. Well, the more you find out about Shackleton, the more incredible it is. You just cannot believe that something like this happened. But he's buried there, north to south rather than east to west, which is traditional, because his wife said his first love was the poles. So you can bury him north to south, and that's his grave. And the guy on the right there with the sunglasses on his head had a bottle of whiskey, and you toast Shackleton. And then the grave next to it is Frank Wild, who is equally as incredible in terms of what he did as part of that expedition. So you toast him as well. So you have 2 tots of whiskey when you're there. Unless, like me, this year you're doing dry January. Big mistake. Anyway, so yes, fascinating. There's a lot of the talks you get on the ship are about Shackleton and the various bits of that incredible experience they had. But it was just about to get a bit more real. For that sounds a bit. I'm going to be careful how I say this, but the actual story came to life a bit more for us in the next few days. So I shall just go on to that. One of the things that you might want to do when you're in South Georgia is pop round to another cove and see this chap. And this is the macaroni penguin. Macaroni is a name for a dandy. So in the olden days when they used to wear feathers in their hats, this is supposed to be reminding people of a dandy. So it's called a macaroni penguin. They have a sort of a sad clown face, I think. So, but they're fantastic. Now these nest in very steep grassy slopes. So different to the mounds that the gentoo penguins live on, different to the rocky boulders that the rock hoppers are in. So they all have their niche. And so you go to a cove where there's a grassy slope and there's macaroni penguins. Close up of a fur seal there, South Atlantic fur seal. These do actually chase you. So what you're told if you go too close, and you're supposed to walk towards them with your hands up and take a step towards them, and they'll stop. But you have to, and they tell you that's what you do, and they do stop. But they want to say they might take a little movement towards you, but never really a problem. But very cute, very cute. But you probably don't want to be bitten by one, I'm sure. You don't want to be bitten by one of these as well. So this is a sub-adult elephant seal. You can start to see the nose growing on there, but these are just having a little go. All the adult males are out to sea at this time of year, so you can see how big they are. I mean, that's a 4-foot penguin, quite a large animal there behind. So I talked about small birds, perching birds, and I also talked about eradication of predators. South Georgia had an extremely bad problem with rats, thanks to humans. And the South Georgia pipit, the most southerly songbird on the planet, was only found in little rocky offshore islands. So, yeah, when they eradicated the rats successfully, South Georgia pipit is now a very easy bird to see, and it was almost immediate that they were successful because they nest on the ground and a presto. So fantastic, a lovely, but looks a little bit like a meadow pipit that you're a bit familiar with, but lives a long way away. So we're just going to head to Antarctica now for the last section of the tour, and this is obviously the thing. It's another continent, and people get very excited about it, quite rightly. But this just on the way, this last year, this was A23A, the largest iceberg, and just a quick story about this. The captain says, well, tomorrow we will actually be passing the A22 and 23A, but and we will do that about 4:30 in the morning. I'm thinking, oh my goodness me, we'd have to get up that early to see it. And he says, if you don't want to get up early, don't worry, we'll be passing it for the next 6 hours. So it was that's a lovely way of putting it. The most bizarre thing there's some seals on top of it. Don't ask me why, can't understand it. That is 29 meters high. Anyway, arguably the most important bit of wildlife in the Antarctic is krill, and when there's a big wave, some of it gets washed up on the deck of the ship, and there's some krill for you. Right, we're going to get into the icy waters now, and there's a few different bits of wildlife here. Even if you didn't know this bird existed, you'd probably guess it did. This is a snow petrel. What a brilliant name and a beautiful, delicate bird that is, a snow petrel. On the way, we go to this place, bringing the Shackleton story alive. So Frank Wild, as part of the rescue mission, the rescue mission was Shackleton get to South Georgia. When the Endeavour was it Endeavour or Endurance? Forgotten. Anyway, when the ship was crushed, they went north, two boats, and Frank Wild kept the crew with him, all but the 3 or 4 that went to South Georgia successfully, including Shackleton. kept them alive. And we thought, well, it must be a lovely little place. He kept them alive for 4.5 months or so. This is actually where it was, and there's a little statue in the middle there. That's where Frank Wild and a couple of upturned boats lived with all their men, and no one perished. They successfully rescued them all. I'm skipping over one of the most amazing stories, which I'm sure some of you know, but tremendous. Moving further into the icy waters, you start to see icebergs, of course, and this is a Cape petrel or a pintado petrel, painted petrel. And then we're just going down into Antarctica now, and this is a map of where we went this last year. So we actually had a little bit more time to go right down the peninsula. So you don't go, we're not actually in the Antarctic Circle, but we're about 200 kilometers to that most southerly point there. So 200 kilometers from the Antarctic Circle. Still pretty cool, And look at the views. Icebergs, absolutely tremendous. These are where the big icebergs are. Look at this. And there's a photograph of a bit of carving of an iceberg there. Such beautiful things. You can come back with just photographs of icebergs. The other thing you see a lot of, because the sea is so rich, so much krill, a cetacean. So in this case, a humpback whale. We counted, I think on this last trip, we counted 198. That's how many sightings of humpback whale we saw. And they're quite close. As you can see, there's our ship. And they often are quite a playful creature. So they appear to be playful, but they do jump out and breach quite a lot. So here's a breaching humpback whale. Well, you know what that is? Iceberg. Icebergs sometimes have penguins on them. So these little dots are a new species of penguin for us. And I think this, for me, is the best penguin. This is a Adelie penguin, which is quite small, about 1.5 feet. They've just got a personality. They're just incredible things. Look at them. Lovely pale eye. They get little lumps of frost on their flippers when they walk along, and they just have something about them. They're just delightful. Adelie penguins. And we go to some of the biggest colonies of Adelie penguins there are. These are all little dots in the background there of Adelie penguins, all spaced out nicely. And again, they have chicks too. Tremendous. Yes, and it snows sometimes. There was a little blizzard within a half an hour. It was quite nice weather again, but there was a blizzard, and this one just stayed put. Lovely Adelie penguin with snow. I don't know. They're my favorite, I think. But these are all quite cute as well. So there's another southern one. This is the icy penguins. So this is the chin strap penguin. You can see why it's called that. Lovely penguin. Again, it's not hard to take pretty good photographs. So I'm not. A lot of these photographs are my own, but quite a lot are from the expedition leader, Sara Jenner, from the first year, who's given me a fair few as well. So the ones that really artistic are hers. But I want to take you this. This is, you've heard of bird watchers and twitchers, haven't you? Those people that travel all over the place to see rare birds. Well, this is a twitch in Antarctica, and this happened last year because we found an emperor penguin. And this is the photograph I think I gave to Lizzie to make the poster for this talk. And this is an emperor penguin in amongst some Gentoo penguins. This is the big one. And you don't expect to see this. You go on special trips to see emperor penguins. They live on the ice. So you don't generally see them unless you get quite an extensive trip to go and see an emperor penguin colony. But just so often, ones will travel around. And this one was just sat there, and we just could not believe it. So that previous slide of all those boats looking at was a lot of people very, very happy to see that. If what wasn't good enough, just after we saw that emperor penguin, we finally saw leopard seal, which is an incredibly a 3-meter long seal. Look at the face on that. It looks like a lizard, doesn't it? It's a very strange, or a sort of reptilian face. Yeah, and pretty big teeth as well. But we saw 8 of these in that afternoon. After emperor penguin, 8 leopard seals in sunshine, sat on icebergs. Best wildlife afternoon I've ever had. And this is us on our way back, taking a photograph artistically through an arch in the ice. Oh, yeah, it wasn't over that day. So we went back to the ship and we just said, well, that was amazing. The best thing now we could happen as we sail on is to see killer whales. Within half an hour, we've seen some killer whales. So chuffed to bits. Right, that was fantastic. But we have to head back, and on our way back, we come straight from Antarctica, straight back to Ushuaia. But in fact, this is Chile. We're going round Cape Horn, and there's the monument to the top to say this is the Cape Horn. And these are more black-browed albatrosses flying around in front. Also a great place for dolphins as well. So a lot of dolphins here. Back into Ushuaia. So the first photograph I took was from that sort of where the snow line is from a hotel looking out. And this is looking back to the quite unusual town of Ushuaia, but that's where we dock. And as customary for these sorts of things, and we'll end with a sunrise in this case of the place that I mentioned was one of the most fabulous places I've ever been, South Georgia, as the mist rises. So it's a whistle-stop tour, but it's I hope that's brought to life some of the things that you can see in Antarctica. Certainly, I feel utterly blessed to have been there twice. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Richard. That was really absolutely brilliant and so wonderful. What a privilege to see all those fabulous photographs, and a double privilege for you because you got to go there. How very nice.
I know, and they say trip of a lifetime. I feel like a bit of a, but I was working. I was.
Was it cold? It looks as though it was cold.
Well, no, I mean it's the summer there, you see. So
Ah,
it's certainly not it's not warm, but around about 1 degree. It's not as cold as you think it would be. I mean, if you went in July, August, it would be bitter, but no, absolutely. I think the coldest it got was about -6 or something like that. But we were very lucky both times I've been without any wind. So, quite often it was about
so you were going down.
-1.
You say it was summer, but you were in December, was it, that you were traveling down there?
Yeah, Southern Hemisphere. So
Summer.
it's the summer.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
how much daylight do you get?
Oh, quite a lot. Yes. So it's light at 4, and then yeah, dark at 10:30, something 11. So it's um yeah, it's pretty long days if you wish to, but of course it does tire you out, all this fresh air.
Yes, and yeah, I mean, I've experienced all day long days up in the Shetlands, and you
Mm,
do kind of you get used to. You just have to go to bed at some stage. You can't be up all the time, can you? Despite the
indeed.
fact that it's light all the time. Yeah. So, how long do the tours take? How long does it take you to get there? Do you have to? You presumably have to fly all the way to.
Yes, yes, it's a good question. So the trip that we do, so this is a wildlife charter, so you can go on all sorts of things. You can go to ones that you get on ships that don't land, just to visit, just to be to Antarctica. But this trip is 18 days on the ship. So proper chartered, we charter the whole ship. So Nature Trek in this case chartered the whole ship. You can go there for shorter trips to go to Antarctica and back, but we did South Georgia and Falklands. But to answer your original question, we go into Buenos Aires from Britain. You spend about a day there. You get to Ushuaia a day before your ship goes, so that if there's any travel problems, you're not going to miss your ship because the ship won't wait for you. The ship has a deadline. So, yeah, it's bizarre actually because you go to Buenos Aires and you have like the best part of a day there, and of course it's really hot. And you come out from December or January in Britain, and you have to remember to put your suntan cream on, and you see all these not subtropical species of wildlife. It's quite
Uh,
something. And the next thing you know, you're in a town that looks a little bit like Dover.
yeah, yeah, so yeah, packing for the trip must be quite tricky though, because you've got to cover all sorts of possibilities in terms of
Yeah.
weather. Yeah, fascinating. So yes, so we've got a few questions coming through now. One that says biosecurity measures must be very difficult to enforce. Who polices them?
Right, so really good question. This, and so one of the first things you do, and I mentioned this very briefly, I think, is that you sign. There's same with North Pole, so it's sort of trips to Spitsbergen and Greenland, etc. Um, but you sign a declaration, and then you understand that this is you have to be responsible, act in a certain way. In terms of the enforcing. So the government, so it's a government enforced thing. So there's a government in South Georgia and Falklands, and they, I mean, literally, you just wouldn't believe it. But the only tie I saw on my trip was when the government official came on board to go through the check with us.
Yeah,
So there's, and just to give some idea of how it's enforced, if we fail the biosecurity check, the pressure is on the company that have gone through the measures to help us clean our clothes and etc. like that, and they then of course they don't. I don't know. It's bad news for them as a company because they haven't been able to enforce the biosecurity measures that they've agreed
yeah.
to.
So it's in their
So they
interest to
are.
make sure that it happens then.
Yeah. You actually, the day before you go to South Georgia, you're down in one of the rooms there, and they've got hoovers, and they give you a little safety pin. I mentioned paper clips, and you do that. Then they check them, they say you're all right, and they say right, and that's it. You're good to go. You go through dips before you go out onto the land, etc. And you can't sit down. It's incredibly, incredibly tightly controlled. But to answer your question, it is government officials that do this, and then someone from they will come on and give you a talk about the location as well. South Georgia especially. South Georgia is particularly important because it's got such a huge number of colonies of elephant seals and various penguins.
Mm. Does anybody live on South Georgia? Well, you did say there's a little museum, wasn't there?
Yeah, so there's 4 staff there,
For
as
people.
far as I could
Mm.
see, but there's a research station there which has about 20 people in it. And there may well be another 2 or 3 research stations. Antarctica, of course, has got many, many research stations from, India, Mexico, Britain, of course, and but they're quite spaced out.
Well, it's a big enough
And they're all
space, isn't it?
regulated as well. We had a talk about the inspection of these research stations, and to do with how they store their fuel and their all sorts of really quite. I mean, it's really quite a thorough thing. We actually felt we were. If they find 10 seeds on your jacket, you cannot go. They will not let you land.
Yeah, well, quite right
10. So
too.
you're allowed up to
Yeah,
10. If you get to 11, they won't let you land. But Sarah, who I mentioned, had donated some of these wonderful photographs. She said never failed. But we were so close. We were something like 8 seeds. We had
really. And
we
that's not
had
just for
maybe a
one person, that's for the whole
particular
group.
officials. That's for the whole group. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So I'm really impressed. Very impressed.
yeah. Well, that's good. And sometimes it does make you wonder whether this should be something that's applied to all tourism, where you're going to delicate sort of areas that were very
Yeah.
vulnerable to outside people coming in.
Certainly. So I know Galapagos is exactly the same. I've never been there, but
Yeah,
I know that's the same for invasive species mainly. It is really is that. So yeah, I was very very impressed. But they will talk. Part of this. You're not just talking about wildlife. You're talking about. We had to talk about meteorites because Antarctica is a great place to find meteorites because it's because they're black and the snow's white, and
yeah, yeah. You can
then we
see
had to
them.
talk about the biosecurity. We had to talk about the history. These lectures on these things are absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's very interesting. Thank you. I was quite interested in the removal of predators on the islands, and how much damage the rats have done in the past and how much effort is put into the removal of predators. Do you know?
Yeah. It's a really big deal. It's a really hard thing to do. Essentially, we've gone and mucked up so many places, and anyone that's been to the New Zealand will know that the ecology of New Zealand is largely trashed. There's hardly anything left of the native fauna. But what's left? And I mention New Zealand particularly because New Zealand's are best at knowing how to do this. So generally, when there's an eradication program anywhere in the world, there'll be a load of New Zealanders that say, "Well, this is how you do it. This is how you do it." You set up your art, you clean an island, and yeah, very, very impressive, but very long term, quite expensive. So a lot of these things, the Ascension Island was one, and fairly recently, just all these things that nest on the ground because that's what they have to do. They had pigs. The pigs there just went around eating everything,
Yeah, yeah,
and once they got rid of them. The numbers of these things just went through the roof, really, really
fantastic.
quick. Yeah,
Yeah,
but big deal,
so
big deal. So it's not always
it is.
successful. So Gough Island is the one that RSPB was involved in. RSPB is a big supporter of obviously British overseas territories.
And where is that?
Largely, sorry, the Gough
Gough
Islands.
Island?
Yes, it's right. It's right further. It's the other side of South America. So it's and it's what was it? I think it was mice. This is the one I may have seen. It was really quite unpleasant film of mice eating baby albatrosses, and the
I have
baby
seen it.
albatrosses don't fear them, and they just sit there and get eaten. It's a horrible subject, but they tried eradication and it didn't quite work. But even so, the numbers of albatrosses in those following years was much better, but unfortunately it wasn't 100%. So anyway, it's a you could talk on that for an hour, I'm sure, but it's a big deal,
Absolutely.
and arguably one of the most important things you can do for conservation is to tackle invasive non-native species in terms of the effect it has on conservation of the biodiversity.
Yeah. What about things like fishing?
Oh yeah, so marine exclusion zones is another thing that happens
Yeah.
around a lot of these places. So uh, Tristan da Cunha is there's a massive another sort of outposted UCOT UK's overseas territory. Best very successfully created a marine exclusion zone around that for fishing, so that the wildlife that lives there. So yeah, big
That's,
big
that's
big
quite
deal.
encouraging.
There's always more to
Yeah.
do, isn't there? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Just
but
needs us all to do
there's
it,
always
really,
more to
doesn't
do.
it?
Yeah,
Yeah. Absolutely
yeah,
brilliant. Okay. Well, trying to think of other things that we might like to know. But yeah, I think it's been really, really lovely to see the photographs, and I'm quite envious of you being able to go there and see all that. Yeah. And what other sorts of tours does the Nature Trek do? I know they do them around Shetlands because we've seen one for Shetland as well.
yeah, yeah. So actually, I think they're 40 years old, the company, and they're doing a 40-year cruise around the British Islands to Lundy and Shetland and Orkney and etc. And yeah, they're very, very popular. I would say actually the company, as it's a travel company, and of course they encourage lots and lots of people to go on planes and things. It's quite encouraging to know that they're a very successful company. They are putting quite a lot of money back into conservation projects, and so they should,
Yeah.
really, because their business is showing people wildlife. I'm talking as a freelancer. I'm not talking as a staff member. So I
I'm
really,
relieved to hear that.
you know,
Yeah.
they raise money. So every sort of long haul flight, they put in money to a trust for the land. Well, sorry, put into the World Land Trust, and they've bought a huge chunk of Ecuador in between two existing nature reserves, and to join them up. And really something like that is incredible. But they do lots of no flight holidays, using the ferries to Spain, etc. And then there's all those train journeys that have opened up across Europe to sort of Eastern Europe and stuff like that. So
Yes.
there's a lot of people don't want to fly and things like that. But yeah, so there's more of that information on their website for what
That's
they
quite
do.
interesting, isn't it? Because people who are aware of sort of climate change and species disappearing will be much more concerned about not flying.
Yeah, certainly, and it's
So,
I know there is obviously a benefit to seeing the value in wildlife for a lot of people, but
but
it's again that's another seminar, isn't it? But
absolutely, yes, yeah. But it's nice to have something to discuss properly, isn't it?
mm, mm.
Thank you very much, Richard, for doing that. It was most enjoyable, and I'm sure that all the audience have enjoyed watching too.
Well, it's a pleasure to talk about it. As I say, I feel blessed to have been, and to actually just talk and enthuse about it is great. And yeah, as a child, I always wanted to go there, and I've been there, and I'm over the
Very
moon.
lucky. Okay, thank you. So we have for our next webinar coming up, which will be on Thursday, the 21st of November, and Tom Maybury will be talking about Orator Hunt and the Ilchester Jail. On Saturday, the 9th of November, we have a live event over at Somerton, where they'll be talking about the archaeological excavations. On the 14th of November, we've got a talk in the Wyndham Hall about the 20th century buildings in Bridgewater. So that's a live event at the Wyndham Hall. And again, on the 16th of November, so it's a busy old month for SANHS this time, we have a talk at the Wyndham Hall. That will be the smallest show on earth and everything you wanted to know about flea circuses. How fabulous will that be? Should be quite entertaining. And also at the Wyndham Hall, we've now got an independent cinema working. And on Friday, the 8th of November, they will be showing a film called The Shooting Party, and that will be at 7 p.m. for 7:30. And on the 13th of December, so it's way in the future, but you need to know about this one, we will be having a silent version of Peter Pan, who will with a live harpist accompanying. So lots and lots of fun things to know about with SANHS at the moment. If you want to check out any details, just go to the SANHS website. So that only leaves me to thank all the webinar team, Nathanael, Tony and Allan. And thank you, of course, for coming along. And we hope you see you again at the next webinar.